Welcome to the Legacy Radio Network. This is the Everything Financial Radio Show. I'm your host, Dennis Tubbergen. We are here every week at this time. If you're a new listener, welcome. We have a great show for you today. Leslie Paige, spokesperson for Citizens Against Government Waste, is here. She will reveal to us some new forms of government waste, and we'll also be talking about what could be a perfect storm politically and economically and fiscally speaking at the end of the year. We'll get her take. Glad to have Leslie back on the show. I will also be talking about real estate parallels. I'm going to read to you some paragraphs describing the real estate market of the 1920s, and you'll probably have to pinch yourself because it's going to sound a lot like what we went through here just over the past few years, and I'm going to draw some parallels and ask you if the potential outcomes from here might be predictable. Also, we'll be talking about the difference between a debt-driven recession and an inventory-driven recession and what it means for you and your money. And debt levels today are higher than they were prior to the Great Depression. Could that be true? We'll investigate that and give you the details. If you have not attended one of our discovery groups, and if you're a new listener, let me explain what our discovery groups are. We have an informational meeting that we do periodically on August the 14th. We'll be out in Kentwood at Railside Golf Club, and on August the 16th, we'll be out in Caledonia. You can go to personallegacyseminars.com to attend the information meeting or to get more information. Just click on the appropriate date and location to register. You'll also find some information, as I said, about the discovery groups on the site. Also, we have a new offer for you this week. If you'd like to get a copy of our 2012 guide, Surviving a Market Crash, you can go to investingapproach.com. That is investingapproach.com. Give us your name and address and let us know where to mail your guide, and we'll be glad to do that. I'll also, in the second segment of today's show, be sharing with you a bit of an excerpt from that guide. You'll want to stay tuned for that as well. If you'd like to listen to past interviews that we've had here on the Everything Financial Radio Show, whether it's Dr. Mark Faber, who we interviewed last week, Peter Schiff, Harry Dent, Jim Rogers, Ian Gordon, we have all those interviews archived, so you can go listen to them at your leisure. You can even download them to whatever gizmo you have that might play them back for you. That is everythingfinancialradio.com. Everythingfinancialradio.com is the website. Just go to the archived show section and click the show that you want, and everything is there so you can go back and listen to the interviews and get the perspectives on some very, very bright folks, economically speaking. I am pleased to have back with me on the Everything Financial Radio Show today, Leslie Paige. Leslie is Vice President for policy and communication, as well as a spokesperson for the organization Citizens Against Government Waste. I've been a big fan of the organization's work for a long, long time, and very, very pleased to have Leslie back on the show. So, Leslie, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me back. I so enjoyed my last conversation with you, so I'm glad to be back.
Well, hey, for listeners that may not be familiar, Leslie, with what the organization Citizens Against Government Waste does and how it came about, give us some background.
Well, Citizens Against Government Waste is an organization that's been around since the Reagan administration, as a matter of fact. What was our origins were that when President Reagan came into office, he had promised to sort of review the entire fiscal health, if you will, of the federal government, what it was doing with our tax money. And he quickly convened a collection of business people who spent 2 years auditing the federal government. And he did this at no taxpayer expense. He brought in J. Peter Grace, who is now gone, unfortunately. He was the head of the Grace Company, the W.R. Grace Company in New York. And Mr. Grace went out and tapped as many people in the business private sector as he could and said, please, will you task us some people to come to Washington to work for 2 years at your expense to review the books, basically. And that's what they did. So in 1982 it started. In 1984 they came out with 2,500 plus recommendations for how the government could, run more efficiently, what could be eliminated, what could be consolidated, et cetera, et cetera. And in the aftermath of that, Peter Grace teamed up with Jack Anderson, the famous muckraking columnist Jack Anderson, who's also not with us anymore, and basically said we need an organization to carry this legacy forward so that it doesn't just sit around and kind of die a quiet death in some government warehouse or on the shelves somewhere of some government bureaucracy. We need to continue it. So that's where we come in. So we've been here since 1984.
Leslie, taking a look at government today, the federal government in particular, it appears that there is a lot of waste. And before we started recording the interview today, we talked a bit about the Postal Service, and I think only in Washington could you have an organization that brings a plan to Congress saying, here's what we need to do to fix our fiscal problems, and Congress takes it under advisement, decides to study it, takes no action. What's going on with the Postal Service?
Yeah, well, the Postal Service is on a very, very slippery slope. In fact, people are talking about defaults, and very quickly. They're scheduled to make some payments and to prepay into their retiree health care plans within the next couple of months. And there's widespread understanding that they will be unable to do that probably. Now, that does not necessarily mean that we're going to have an automatic shutdown of the Postal Service. But I think, as with so many things in Washington, the debacle at the Postal Service is one of the most foreseeable, preventable problems that we've ever run into. I personally have been working on postal reform for 10 years at least. So, this was not some surprise around the corner, out popped the fiscal crisis at the Postal Service. This is something that has been building for years, and that the Congress has failed, as usual, to address in a timely way. And now here we are on the brink. They really love this brinksmanship, as you'll see. And if you just look at the news every morning, you'll see this, that we're on the brink with almost every aspect of our financial health in this country right now because of the lack of leadership in Washington in some ways. But anyway, so the Postal Service is really in trouble. They have real structural problems, a lot of overhead and expenses that they cannot and have not been able to address. Labor costs are massive, and they are not dealing with that. They also have huge operational costs that they are not being allowed to address by Congress. Congress keeps interfering with, with their ability to take care of their business. If this was a private sector business, for example, they would have right-sized their operations a long time ago, which means closing and consolidating facilities. And some of these facilities all over the country are in areas where we have 8 customers a day going into a facility. And you're still paying to keep that thing open and paying, very high wages. And there's a postal facility 10 minutes down the road. This is happening all over the country. The Postal Service, to its credit, the management of the Postal Service wants to close post offices. They've been trying for years. They've had lists for the last couple of years of 3,000 or more facilities off and on that they would like to either close or consolidate. That could be anything from the retail operation to a processing plant. And Congress has repeatedly interfered and stymied them from doing what any normal business would be allowed to do if need be under these circumstances.
Leslie, to jump in there, everybody knows that something needs to be done. The mood of the country seems to be one of being certainly fed up with Congress. They have all-time low approval ratings, and yet Congress doesn't take action. Are they concerned that they're going to lose some votes to the people that work at the post office? Why do they not take the action that needs to be taken?
Well, I will say there are a number of reasons why, but I would say one of the most predominant reasons why the Postal Service, why there's so little action on this, because the postal labor unions are extremely powerful. That's one of the reasons. And so what happens is every time there's a discussion of consolidating, right-sizing, and there will have to be some right-sizing in both the labor force and the bricks and mortar operations of the Postal Service. That is just inevitable. The volume has dropped. Postal volume dropped 25% over the last decade. It is inevitable because of the internet and because of the way we are doing business in this country that we do not require as much, hard copy mail as we used to. We're not going to change that, and we shouldn't try to change that. So anyway, we have a huge labor force and a huge bricks and mortar operation, not to mention a fleet of vehicles, et cetera, that are costing an incredible amount of money. And then on top of that, you throw in the retirement and health care pension benefits to retired postal employees, and you are talking about a giant unfunded mandate going out many years. And, to its credit, the Postal Service would like to do something. But keep in mind that closing postal facilities in this country is almost as fraught with political problems as it is to close bases, military bases. And so you cannot believe when you see this, but, every time the Postal Service puts out a list of postal facilities, and this is bipartisan, by the way, the members of Congress, swarm all over that list and start picking and teasing out the ones they don't want to close because it's in their district or their state. And before you know it, the list is winnowed to nothing. And in fact, in the most recent legislative initiative, which there's a bill in both the House and the Senate right now. The Senate bill is not very good, but the House bill is better. The Senate bill actually puts off closing postal services for another 2 years, I think. Check me if I'm wrong on that, but it puts it off at least a year, if not two.
Until after the next election.
Puts it in mothballs and says you can't do anything right now. We're going to make you hold on that. We're going to freeze this entire process. It's like, wow. You wonder and this is a Senate. This is Republicans and Democrats alike in the Senate doing this. So this is you do wonder where people's heads are.
Yeah, well, we're going to leave it there in this segment. We're chatting with Leslie Paige. She is a spokesperson for Citizens Against Government Waste. When we come back, we're going to chat with Leslie about politics. So stay tuned. This is the Everything Financial Radio Show, and we'll be back after these words. Stay with us.